Hello and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today we are back to discussing a mercenary unit that joined the Ward of Blake. They served the Draconis Combine for years. They changed their name in the 4th Succession War. And they have a redemption arc. Sort of. They are McGee's, Simonson's, McGee's Cutthroats. Mercenaries usually have some fun aesthetics, and the Cutthroats are no exception. The Cutthroats have a memorable insignia of a gas mask skull and crossbones design set upon a stylized gray disc with checkerboard flair. The paint scheme for the Cutthroats is gray with black and blue highlights. However, it is noted in a couple of sourcebooks that the recon team uses local area camouflage for their paint when stalking their targets. McGee's Cutthroats are a typical mercenary force that shows up in several important battles. To skip spoilers, go to the time listed. They were originally a Free Worlds League unit that was heavily damaged in the 2nd Succession War. They would gather what they could and leave to find fortune as mercenaries. The first contract they would take would be with the Draconis Combine. They would be noted as one of the best equipped mercenaries during the early 3rd Succession War due to their high-end equipment. They would be stationed on Souk, defending the world from Lyran raids for decades. In 2953, the Cutthroats would raid the world of Alexandria while serving with the Combine. They would fight against 2 battalions of the 20th Arcturan Guards. The Guards would have a fully equipped orbital fighter base, making landing far more difficult for the dropships. The Cutthroats would lose a dropship and return to their jump ship in order to call for backup. The DCMS would send in 2 mech battalions as support, but the LCAF would send out for their own reinforcements, leading to a cycle of both sides calling for more troops. The battle would eventually involve 7 different regiments, but the Combine forces would choose to pull out in 2955 as the campaign felt like a pointless resource dump. The Cutthroats would come back in good condition, with some good gear despite losing some of their Victor battle mechs, which was their primary heavy unit. They would continue their Combine contract as the 3rd Succession War dragged on. In the early 3020s, a company of Cutthroats would fight McKinnon's Raiders on Hun Ho. The Raiders were going to attack the world, but during their drop operation, a mechanical problem caused their dropship to crash into the sea. While they were doing repairs, a company of Cutthroats would attack. The Cutthroats would have the advantage as the Raiders were separated and partially damaged. However, the dropship would provide fire support during the battle, and the Cutthroats would pull back. The retreating mercenaries didn't know that the dropship wasn't able to fire a second volley due to the damage it had taken. Thus, McKinnon's Raiders had a chance to finish repairs and escape the world. In 3025, they would be stationed on Gaeldon, but their loyalty would be questionable as the Combine leadership would start to turn on mercenaries. This would cause members of the Cutthroats to want to switch to a different employer. Despite that, they would continue their contract as the war came to an end. As the war began, McGee's Cutthroats would be in a unique position as they remained in Combine employ despite the declaration of death to mercenaries. In May 3029, the Cutthroats would attack Groveld as part of a Combine push into the Federated Suns territory. They would defeat the planetary militia with ease, but afterward, enemy militia commandos would assassinate the second-in-command of the Cutthroats. This would have major consequences. The new XO, Matthew Simonson, would initiate a coup against Commander Andrew McGee. This was due to their differing opinions on the Draconis Combine. It would be a bloody power struggle, but by the end of it, the unit would have a new name, Simonson's Cutthroats, as the McGee family was forced out of the unit. Simonson's Cutthroats would quit their Combine contract and go to Galatea to find a new employer. They would use this time to recruit new soldiers and do what repairs they could afford. In the 3030s, they would take up a contract with the Federated Commonwealth, working for House Davian. Simonson's Cutthroats would be sent to Bennett III as part of the planned attack on the Draconis Combine. They would be part of a team hitting Lima. However, due to issues with the KF drive of their jump ships, The strike would be delayed 3 weeks. The Cutthroats would defeat the infantry-based militia of the world with little effort. They would hold the world and prepare for the counterattack. However, no counter came, and the Cutthroats would hold the world comfortably. They would maintain the garrison for at least a year. The Combine would raid Lima in 43 and 46. Both raids were easily repelled, but it is unclear if the Cutthroats were the garrison at the time. It is known that in 3049, Simonson's Cutthroats would be transferred to Barlow's End, where they faced no major conflict. Simonson's Cutthroats would begin the era on Barlow's End. The Federated Commonwealth would start moving mercenaries up to face the clans alongside the AFFC's frontline units. The Cutthroats decided to let their contract lapse and left the clan invasion corridor as soon as they could. They would take up a job in the periphery working for the Marian hegemony. They would be stationed on Stafford in 3054. They would stay there for a few years before getting a contract with the Cercinus Federation in 3056. They would have several battles with Morrison's extractors during this contract. The extractors would be too powerful for the mercenaries, and the Cutthroats were shattered by the SLDF-era firepower of the deadly pirates. Simonson's Cutthroats would retreat, but their losses would include their commander, Jerry Simonson. This put his son in command of the Cutthroats. They would flee into the deep periphery in order to recover. They would remain there for 5 years. The Cutthroats would make their return to combat in the Chaos March in 3061. They would have 2 understrength battalions and would be serving on Fletcher. Their job was peacekeeping, as the planet was a mess of political issues and power struggles. They would be grateful to take up a contract with the Word of Blake and serve as part of the Terra garrison as the era came to an end. Simonson's Cutthroats would take this era to recover and build back up to full strength thanks to their work with the Word of Blake. This would include getting a new Overlord-class dropship to give them full transport capacity. During this time, their Dragoon rating would decline to a D- due to their lack of action and choice of contractors. In late 3067, the Cutthroats would be moved to CAF to assist the governmental forces that wanted to join the Word of Blake Protectorate. The local militia forces would rebel against the government and try to stop the political alliance. The Cutthroats dealt with the rebellion and remained the garrison force of the world as the Word of Blake War began. At this time, they would have 55% advanced equipment and be at 95% full power. They had fully bounced back from their previously ruined condition. As part of the Word of Blake mercenary forces, Simonson's Cutthroats would attack the world of Ankha in May 3069. They would take the world with little trouble, but one of their dropships would be destroyed in a nuclear attack. The losses this inflicted would make the Word of Blake leave the Cutthroats as a garrison force rather than use them as part of the mercenary assault forces. Instead of going to war, the Cutthroats would help train and recruit people for the Protectorate militia, as well as their own forces. During this time, they would gain skill in finding insurgents and using enhanced interrogation techniques on suspected traitors. Their efforts would eliminate the resistance forces on the world of Ankha and strengthen the Blakists' control of the world. As the war progressed, they would be requested to help on other worlds. This included training militia forces, teaching torture techniques, and assisting with eliminating rebel forces. Simonson's Cutthroats would finally go out to fight properly in September 3070. They would join the 8th and 21st Divisions as they attacked St. Ives. The battle would lead to the deaths of nearly 2 million civilians. Due to the massive amount of collateral damage, the Word of Blake forces would retreat from the world. The Cutthroats would return to Ankha in order to train new forces. Due to their actions in the war, a bounty would be set on the Cutthroats by the MRBC. Several units would attack to collect the bounty, but all would fail. However, in 3071, a group of bounty hunters would arrive using Blakist colors as a disguise. They would attack the local militia and cause chaos near the spaceport. This distraction allowed a platoon of commandos to get into the mercenary base and capture the commander and XO of the Cutthroats. Several other officers would get killed in the fighting before the strike team left the world. The captured leaders of the Cutthroats would be imprisoned for their crimes. Major Anthony Alicia would vow to rescue his commanders, but they never did. The Cutthroats would gather what they could and fled into the periphery as the tides shifted in the war. This allowed them to escape the destruction that many mercenary forces would face during the later part of the Word of Blake War. Simonson's Cutthroats would remain fugitives for decades as they took what work they could find. Finally, in 3021, they would locate Edward McGee and beg for his help. By this time, the McGee family had become wealthy, and they would help rebuild the unit in exchange for taking command once again. Edward McGee would go to the MRBC to argue on behalf of the mercenaries. He would point out that all those involved in the Blake War were now dead or no longer part of the unit. He would also offer to pay any fees that may have been accrued by the mercenaries. The commission would give them approval to be bonded mercenaries once again. McGee's Cutthroats would get a contract with the independent world of San Hoa in 3140. When the contract ended in 3146, they would take up a contract with the Mirian hegemony once again. In the dawn of the new era, the Cutthroats would get an odd contract. They would be hired by staff from Starcore Industries to raid their factories on San Hoa. Thus, McGee's Cutthroats masqueraded as pirates to assist in corporate sabotage. Their attack on San Hoa and other worlds would cause the current mercenary garrison, Brian's Legion, to give chase. They would evade the Legion and prepare to attack the main factory on San Hoa, but would run into the Screaming Eagles mercenary team who had recently been added to the garrison. McGee's Cutthroats would be defeated, but the Screaming Eagles only kept the advanced tech and allowed McGee's Cutthroats to salvage their older units. Some of the members of McGee's Cutthroats would leave to join the Screaming Eagles. However, some of the San Hoa local security forces who didn't like Starcore Industries would join up with the Cutthroats. The new soldiers would make up for their losses, and they left to seek a new contract while only being down one battalion. The Cutthroats would not be in the best of shape, but thankfully, periphery nations seldom care about such things. Another mercenary force with vague origins who was nearly destroyed in the Blake War era. I feel like I've covered several of those already, probably because I have. Anyhow, they are one of the few who survived during the Word of Blake War, and are still out there doing whatever work that comes their way. Not a unit you can admire, but at least they are still alive. Due to their turbulent history, there aren't that many notable pilots in the Cutthroats. Andrew McGee. A legacy of the McGee family and commander during the late Third and Fourth Succession Wars. However, he would be defeated in a fight with his XO over whether or not to continue working for the Combine. This would end the McGee family leadership of the Cutthroats for almost 100 years. Matthew Simonson. He was promoted to the XO in 3029. He would pull a coup over a disagreement about working for the Draconis Combine in May 3029. He would break the contract, and the Cutthroats would go to Galatea to look for a new contractor. He would take a contract with the Federated Commonwealth and lead his troops in battles against the Draconis Combine. Jerry Simonson. He would take over as the commander of the Cutthroats prior to 3050. He would decide that fighting the clans was a bad idea, so he led his team into the periphery to hide and find new work. In 3056, the Cutthroats would fight Morrison's extractors, and Jerry would die during the fighting, alongside 2 battalions of his troops. Victor Simonson. He was the commander of the 2nd Company of the 1st Battalion when his father died, and he would be forced into the command of the Cutthroats. He would take the team into the Chaos March in 61, and later take up a contract with the Word of Blake. However, in 71, he would be captured by bounty hunters and convicted for the war crimes that the Cutthroats had committed while serving the Word of Blake. Early on, he piloted a Spider. Edward McGee. He was a descendant of the original McGee line, and would be approached to take command of the unit in 3121. He would use his family's fortune and connections to put the Cutthroats back in their right place. He would remain in command until he passed it down to his daughter near the end of the Dark Age. Ross Malone. He was a skilled tracker who served in Cushing's Scout Lance. He was skilled at shadowing enemy formations to gather intel. He would turn down promotions to remain as a scout. Also, he would do his own maintenance in order to make sure his mech ran the way he wanted. He piloted a Wasp called Night Shroud. Wasim Naifeh, a Hafizami Dark Age pilot who served with the Arkob Legion. He went AWOL to get out of an arranged marriage to a woman he hated. He stole a battle mech and changed his name before joining the Cutthroats. He won a shooting competition on Galatea in 3146, which earned him some respect. He is still wanted by the Legion for desertion. He pilots a rifleman. Like many mercenaries, the Cutthroats take what they can get. Thus, they have many units from the Draconis Combine, Federated Commonwealth, and whatever they could scrounge in the periphery. Later on, they get a boost in their tech by the word of Blake, providing them with some much more advanced units than what they had been using during that time. They lack clan mechs and never got their tech level above 60% advanced equipment. The Cutthroats were never much larger than a regiment, and during most eras they are down at least one company, and at worst only have 2 or less battalions. They would tend to be a medium weight unit that focused on energy weapons to save on ammo costs. Their original tactics were built around ambushes using light units to scout out the enemy. Once they knew the general patrol and defense routes, they would move in their heavier units and strike when the enemy's guard was down. The use of stealth and flanking would continue in the periphery, but upon training with the word of Blake, they would specialize in headhunting attacks. The Cutthroats would usually have a battalion of light armor and a battalion of infantry. They were able to use their armored cavalry to help set up their traps, with the infantry doing scouting and garrison work when needed. It is noted that the armor forces included Maltier and Gladius combat vehicles. Most of the time, they would have 2 dropships, but would receive an extra Overlord-class dropship while working for the Word of Blake. However, it would get destroyed during the war. Despite some help from the Word of Blake, the Cutthroats went from a well-equipped unit in the Third Succession War to a ragtag unit in the Dark Ages. They have a general downward trajectory, and it is unlikely that they will have a chance to bounce back again. The Cutthroats make an appearance in the abysmal novella A Skulk of Foxes, which I've talked about in previous videos. Beyond that, there aren't a lot of sourcebooks with information about the Cutthroats, making them footnotes more often than not. Yet somehow, they have multiple TRO entries, as well as one of their pilots is a MechWarrior card. As always, bear in mind that some of their sourcebook entries only feature TO&E data. At the beginning of the year, I had considered covering all of the mercenary units that worked for the Word of Blake, but obviously I didn't do that. Covering the Cutthroats has again brought this idea up, and maybe that will be my plan for next year. Still, it is fun to explore some of the seedier units as they add much more flavor to the world of BattleTech than the generic loyal mercenary forces that usually get the spotlight. I'm not sure if I would paint up a set of McGee's Cutthroats. I do like the color scheme, but there isn't enough in their history to warrant my need for this unit. Still, they could be fun for low-point games where they can shine with their scout team. If you have painted up a set, let me know in the comments. Next time, we are going to the Capellan Confederation to discuss the Death Commandos. After that, we're gonna go hunting for Capellans with Smithson's Chinese Bandits. It's going to be a bloody Christmas this year. Thank you for watching. As this will come out near Thanksgiving, I hope you and yours have a wonderful holiday season. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. McGee's Cutthroats do tie in with several videos that I have done in the past. I also have almost 60 videos in this series for those seeking more BattleTech stories. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the tavern.